Hi, fantasy readers. This is Corinne Norton, your fellow book binger, and you are listening to the Finding Fantasy Reads podcast, where you can test out a new fantasy story every single week to find your next favorite author. Today's story is a fun one about a boy finding a lost dragon. It's written by Lauren Hildebrand, who writes character-driven fantasy adventures that explore spiritual truth. As a people-loving introvert, she's passionate about connecting with and mentoring young writers. She works as head instructor at the Author Conservatory. She lives in always windy Kansas, considers Asian cuisine a primary food group, and can usually be found devouring classics or planning her next cosplay. Today's narrator is Paeter Frandsen, host of Christian Geek Central. Stick around to the end or check out today's show notes to see where you can find more from both the author and the narrator. For now, please enjoy The Weaver and the Dragon by Lauren Hildebrand.
The cart bounced and Cato grabbed the seat, his wide straw hat sliding over his face.
"Careful, boya. You won't see the tower faster by breaking your head," Oji-san said.
"Yes, Oji-san." Cato pushed the woven hat back on his head. He spread his feet, clinging to the bolts of brocade piled high in their cart. He couldn't sit down, not when his first glimpse of the Dragon King's horn was so close. His grandfather understood. Oji-san leaned forward and pulled a lever. The lumbering metal box that pulled their cart, grandfather still called it the mule, slowed with a hiss of steam, and the rocking stabilized. "Now it will take longer," Cato cried. Oji-san laughed. "Longer than finding the pieces of your head and stitching them together? If I attach one wrong, your Oka-san will have my hands. A weaver cannot risk such calamity." Cato studied the pines and mesas still hiding the horn, then settled down on the seat with a sigh. Oji-san smiled and pushed the lever. With a clatter of gears, they lurched forward again. Cato squirmed on the seat. A few more hours and they'd be in Ryuki-Karai. He could picture it from Cousin Miroku's stories, the city bustling with farmers, merchants, and artisans who supplied the needs of the samurai in the palace. The palace itself, where Miroku and the other apprentices lived and trained, built halfway up the strange rock column, and towering above both, the sun-burned horn with dragons circling its peak. A shadow moved across the sky, and Cato whipped his head up, but it was only a vulture hanging on the current. The bird flapped great wings and drifted away. Cato settled back against the brocade and sighed.
"Where have your thoughts flown, boya?"
Oji-san smiled at Cato, his eyes barely visible under his straw hat. "To the dragon friends. I'm excited to meet one."
"You already have, Kei-chan. Your cousin."
"You know that's not what I mean, Oji-san." Oji-san pretended to scowl, and Cato adopted a more respectful tone. "Miroku-Nisan is only an apprentice. He hasn't been chosen yet to bond with a dragon. I want to meet a real dragon friend." He dropped his voice until it was covered by the clanking metal mule. "And a real dragon."
"You will."
Oji-san rested his hands on his knees.
"There are many in Ryuki-Karai. Besides," the wrinkles in his face shifted as he smiled, "the Hata family makes the best brocade for the sash of a warrior. Be proud they wear our cloth, flighty Kei-chan, for even you are part of this great alliance."
The cart creaked up an incline, and as they cleared the summit, Cato gasped. A pinnacle of rock, reddish bronze in the burning sunlight, rose alone and proud from the valley floor. The thick column towered 800 feet into the air, then cut off as though slashed by a katana. Dark specks soared about its peak, and sunlight flashed on great wings. "The Dragon King's horn," Cato breathed. Oji-san pulled the brake, and the mule shuddered to a halt. A many-windowed palace with curving, red-tiled roofs clung like an enamel brooch to the cliff face. A slightly larger speck wheeled away from the palace, veering up, up into the sky, where it hung suspended before the blazing sun. Cato's eyes stung as he tried not to lose one glimpse of the majestic outline. The dragon paused, wings outspread, a perfect silhouette against the crystalline blue. A figure so small it seemed almost imagined, bent forward over the dragon's neck. Then the dragon dropped and, in a few wing beats, vanished behind the horn. Cato blinked happily, spots of white swimming before his eyes.
"A beautiful thing to be a part of,"
Ojisan whispered. He released the brake, and the mule rumbled down the slope. Cato kept his eyes toward the horn, even after the pines hid it from view. Something had awakened in his chest, a happiness and an ache combined. He was proud he belonged to the best weaving family in the American territories, happy when he sat beside Ojisan, learning the family trade. Much, much too old to train as an apprentice at Ryuki Karai, and yet, seeing the spreading wings framed against the sky, an impossible desire had hatched, awakened, taken flight in his soul.
"I want to be a dragon friend."
He barely breathed the words, then shuddered at the audacity of the wish.
"Please, ancestors, do not send misfortune for my presumption. Only know I mean it, too."
He glanced at the brilliant sky, then pressed himself back against their cargo and watched for his next glimpse of the horn. I am alone. The hard rocks and sharp trees stretch as far as I can see. I should keep going. Run! That was the last command the samurai gave me. But I do not know where to go, and I am past the point when I can run. I am alone. I felt the moment my mother died. Her pain had echoed through our bond, lending speed to my escape. Then I felt nothing, so she was gone. I could not feel the samurai either. He must be dead also. If he wasn't, he would have come for me. I am alone. I tried to leave the stream bed, to avoid the spiny plants that tear my scales as I pass, but the hot stones burned my paws, and without the stream I have no point of reference, no way to tell if I'm moving in circles. Also, I have no place to hide, so I returned. Now, I pause and lap up the gurgling water. Some drips back into the stream, distorting my reflection, the only face I've seen since I left the samurai. I raise my head and resist the urge to call out, to cry aloud in hope that someone, anyone, will find me, because I am alone, but I cannot be found. That was the second to last thing he told me as he clutched me to his chest and ran, away from my dying mother, away from his best friend whom he'd sworn to protect. His bond let him speak to my mother, just as ours, hers and mine, let me speak to him. And so, as I silently screamed for my mother, clung to him in terror, twisted, fought, and begged him to go back, I heard his voice in my head, a point of safety in that terrifying night. "We can't go back. They are after you, Ryu-chan, and I will not let them have you." He ran a long time through the dark before my mother's pain winked out. Then he stumbled and nearly fell. He paused and lowered me to the ground. Behind us, war cries filled the night. "I'll draw them away," he said. "You must run. You are not safe until you reach the horn." He placed a hand on his katana. "Understand? Don't let anyone find you. Run!" Then he staggered away, followed by the whoops of our pursuers. I obeyed. I ran. And now I can run no more. I sink beneath a stunted bush, pull myself into a tight ball, and hide my eyes from the blistering sun. I am alone. Cato caught 2 more glimpses of the horn as their cart lumbered toward the valley. As long as the horn was visible, he stared eagerly at it, memorizing every line and shadow. When it was hidden, he spun visions of how he'd meet his first dragon. Perhaps he'd be standing on a bluff at sunrise, practicing the sword forms Miroku performed, and with a whoosh of wings, a dragon and rider would land beside him. "I've never seen such control in one so young," the samurai would say. "Who is your sensei?" "Halt!" Cato jerked from his daydream and scrambled to his feet. Ojisan seized the brake. 2 guardsmen stood in the path, pikes in their hands. Ojisan scowled.
What is this? The Shogun's guard halting craftsmen on the road?
Your pardon, Ojisan. The taller guard dipped his head. We take no pleasure in stopping honorable men, but you cannot follow this path today. Cato looked up the roadway. Ahead, the track vanished into a grove of aspen and pine. Near its edge, a dozen guardsmen moved about something hidden by the brush. Ojisan huffed.
The main road is not available for travel?
We apologize, Ojisan, the guard said stiffly. If you turn aside at that cutoff, he pointed to the left, you will find a dry creek bed running down into the valley. From there you may rejoin the road. Ojisan glanced past the guards at the milling warriors.
Is there danger an old weaver and his grandchild should know about?
The guards exchanged a look. There is no danger to you, the taller guard said. You had best move on. You'll add an hour to your journey to Ryuki Karai. Ojisan muttered under his breath, but swung the mule aside. Cato gripped the bolts, craning for a glimpse of what the guardsmen were doing. Had outlaws attacked the roads? Did any of the samurai bring their dragons? The group shifted briefly, and Cato gasped. No. He clutched the piled brocade. No, it couldn't be. He leaned forward, straining for another glimpse to disprove what he thought he'd seen. There, the crumpled wing, the outstretched neck, the single golden eye staring at the shimmering heavens, the iron bolt protruding from the scaly chest. Their cart dipped below the gully rim, and Cato dropped onto the seat. Ojisan, someone's killed a dragon. The hours passed as slowly as the turning cartwheels. Cato couldn't stop picturing the dead dragon. Who could have killed it, and why? He tried to focus elsewhere, to erase the image of that iron bolt dropping the creature from the sky, but the high banks hid all view of the horn, and the sun-parched landscape offered little distraction. The cart rounded a curve, and Cato straightened. Here the left-hand bank dropped away, and beside it stood a figure in long red robes. Gold embroidered the wide sleeves. He raised his eyes to the approaching cart, and they shone black as obsidian beneath his weathered brow.
Whoa there!
Ojisan pulled the brake, leaning back as the mule halted. He bowed to the approaching figure in red.
Greetings.
Greetings, Ojisan. The man held himself erect as a pine. His dark eyes seemed to slide straight through Cato before dismissing him. A medallion hung about his neck, containing the shogun's crest and the symbol of the dual forces that created the world. He's a magician. Are you headed to Ryuki Karai? The magician asked. Ojisan bowed.
Could we offer you a ride to the city?
I do not return there this night, not until my task is complete. His dark gaze flicked from the hills to Cato. Are you excited to see the dragons, boy? Cato swallowed and nodded. I saw one dead 2 hours back. The magician pursed his lips. Yes, I seek the ones that killed it. Have you seen anything since then? Cato shook his head.
Only the grasshoppers,
Ojisan supplied. The magician nodded. May the rest of your journey be equally uneventful. He swept past and up the track. Ojisan watched him go, then unfolded his legs and climbed stiffly from the cart. He placed both hands on his back and leaned backward.
Boya, check the mule since we've stopped.
Cato shook disturbed thoughts from his mind. Those dark eyes unsettled him, scrambled off the seat, and hurried to the mechanical mule. On its round metal side, about where a real mule's belly would be, was a hinged iron door. Cato pulled his sleeve over his hand and opened the hatch. Heat washed from the opening, and he squinted inside. The grate holding the fuel was still burning well, but he tossed more coal onto the crimson bed, then secured the door. Next, he grabbed a metal loop at the mule's shoulder and pulled out the dipstick. He wiped it on his jinbei, then plunged it back into the water tank. When he pulled it out, the tongue showed damp to the third mark. It has 3 sho. Ojisan squinted down their path.
We'll need to refill it.
I saw a stream just beyond that rise, Cato pointed. Ojisan nodded. Good. Take the gourd. I'm going to have a word with nature. He shuffled off into the brush. Cato found the water gourd and headed up the ridge. He spied the stream easily from the crest and hurried toward it. The tang of damp clay met his nose as he slid down the bank, squatted beside the rivulet, and helped himself to a long drink. He filled the gourd next. As the chilly water swirled inside, a pebble clattered on the opposite bank. He looked up, expecting a toad or desert hare. Instead, golden eyes, larger than his own, blinked at him from a scaled head. Cato gasped, dropped the gourd, and scrambled back. The creature also jerked away, pressing itself deeper into the bur oak's shadow. Cato paused, sitting in the mud. Are you a dragon? The creature crouched, watching him closely, wings curled tight against its back. Was it afraid of him? Slowly, Cato rose to his knees. You are a dragon! A baby one! The dragonette bared its teeth. No, it's okay. I'm just a kid too, and I'd never hurt you. Not that I could. The dragon looked past Cato's shoulder, then back at him. Why are you alone? Are you lost? The dragon bobbed its head, as if annoyed at the obvious question, then jerked its nose behind Cato again. Are you looking for someone? Cato guessed. The dragon shook its head and jabbed its nose past Cato's shoulder. Where did I come from? The dragon cocked its head, as if Cato was an idiot. Oh! Cato exclaimed. Is anyone with me? The dragon nodded. Just my Ojisan. We passed a magician, but he's gone already. We're taking a load of brocade to Ryuki Karai. My family are weavers. We can give you a ride if you need help getting home. The dragon seemed to consider this. Slowly, watching Cato closely, it crawled from under the bush. The creature was almost 8 feet from nose to tail and big around as his brother's mastiff, but its shoulder only reached Cato's hip, and its glossy, folded wings rested even with his chest. Cato could hardly believe he was meeting a real dragon. He clenched his hands, resisting the urge to touch the blue-rimmed scales. Such a familiar gesture from a non-dragon friend would be rude. He stood and bowed. I am Hata Cato, your humble servant. The dragon bobbed his head. Cato retrieved the dripping gourd. If you'll follow, I can show you our cart. He backed up and waited. The dragon twitched his wings, then gathered himself and hopped across the stream bed. He trotted up to Cato. Do you fly? Cato asked. It would be amazing to see even a baby dragon fly from this close. The dragon cocked its head, one golden eye looking straight up at Cato. Or are you still too young? How old are you? The dragon pointed at the sun with his nose, then swept his head across the sky. A day? Cato frowned. The dragon scratched a claw on the earth 7 times. 7 days? Cato gasped. You are just a baby. How did you end up here all alone? Was the dragon I saw? The dragonette looked at him, then nudged his hip and gestured up the slope. Oh, yes. They should go. Whatever the dragon's story, he couldn't tell it in signs. But surely he must know the dead dragon. What could have happened? He clutched the water gourd and scrambled up the bank. The dragonette bounded after him, limping slightly. Cato winced. Crusty blood streaked his scales, and scratches marred his sides and flank. Whatever had happened, it hadn't been good. The dragon slowed and returned his stare. Cato gulped and looked away. Ojisan would know what to do, and they were only 4 hours from Ryuki Karai. They'd soon have the dragon safe where it belonged. The boy trots ahead of me, diligently looking away. He is embarrassed for staring. I do not mind. He seems kind and honest. I wish I could speak to him, but he isn't a dragon friend, so I cannot. He crests the ridge and rounds a boulder. I follow. A cart sits in the gully, its bed piled high with bright colors. The wind brings me a human scent, older but reminiscent of the boy, his grandfather.
I start down the slope and pause. A second human is down there too, male, but younger. A strange spiciness, like the incense my mother's dragon friend burned in his helmet, accompanies the second man scent. Is he samurai too? I squint at the blurry cart. My smell is better than my vision, and try to find the second man. Only one stooped figure is near the cart, but the wind cannot lie. I swing my head into the breeze and make out a splash of red further up the gully. Even as a blur, he carries himself with authority. I reach out to him in a thought. Hello? He doesn't hear me. There's a distinct sense of listening when I speak into a dragon friend's mind, but the red figure pauses, looks back, scans the cluttered slopes. I crouch beside the boulder, fear surging back to life. If he could not hear me, he should not have felt me. Cato hurries down the slope. He didn't notice my halting. No, stop! I uselessly call to him. Don't tell them. Oja-san, Cato shouts, waving the gourd. I found the water, and guess what else? A lost baby dragon. He was hiding in the creek bed, and he looks hurt, and he talked with signs, and... Oja-san pushed back his hat. Slower, boya. He caught Cato's shoulder and gazed up the empty ridge. What did you find? Yes, a deep voice cut in. Tell me what you found. Cato whirled. The magician stood a few paces off, his dark eyes boring into the boy's. Cato swallowed. It was only... The magician strode forward, crimson robe flaring, and seized Cato by the chin. What did you find? O great magician, Oja-san's voice was low. Please remove your hand. Cato swallowed, the motion constricted by the harsh grip. A scrabbling came from the left, and he glanced toward the ridge. Halfway down it, the dragonette stood frozen, wings half raised, looking uncertainly between the group and the hills. The magician pushed Cato away and bowed to the dragonette. Greetings, Ryu-sama. I have been worried for your safety since we discovered your dead Oka-san. He stepped forward, and the dragonette stepped quickly back. Do not be afraid. I am here to rescue you. His hand drifted beneath his robe. The dragonette tasted the air, wings quivering. His eyes sought Cato's. Cato shivered. What was happening? The shogun's magician should protect a baby dragon, but Cato still felt the grip on his chin, saw dark eyes boring into his. Nothing about this man felt trustworthy. Come. The magician took another step forward. Let's get you home. He withdrew his hand from his robes, and Cato recognized what it held. Run! He shouted. The dragonette whirled and dashed up the slope. The magician uttered an oath and fired after it, a small iron bolt ricocheting off a rock. The dragon vanished beyond the ridgeline. The magician whirled on Cato, already recocking the device. Cato had seen these before. A larger version hung in his brother's quarters. 4 sleek tubes each held an iron bolt with a gunpowder charge at their base. It was not a long-distance weapon, but up close, he'd seen it pierce a bison's skull. Why did you tell it to run? The magician hissed. Cato trembled. I didn't want... The magician brought up his weapon and fired. Cato ducked and clapped his hands over his ears. He waited, shivering, for the pain to hit. He felt nothing, but something grunted and thumped to the ground behind him. He whirled. Oja-san! His grandfather sat against the cartwheel, his face pale, the iron bolt protruding from his thigh. I'm all right, Kei-chan. The sharp click of the gun being cocked sounded behind Cato. He looked up into the magician's cold face. You have a choice, little dragon friend. Find the dragonette and bring it to me, or... He swung the gun to point at the old weaver. Your Oja-san dies. Cato looked from his groaning Oja-san to the ridge where the dragon had vanished. What if I can't find it? Pray to your ancestors that you do. You have until sunset. Go. Cato ran.
He scrambled up the hill on all fours, shale biting his palms. Tears blurred his vision, but he raced down the other side without wiping them away. Where should he go? What should he do? If he backtracked to the guardsmen, he wouldn't reach them in time. He must find the little dragon, but even then, how could he ask a baby to return to an evil magician? Did the magician kill the dragon on the hill? Was the dragonette already running from him? Cato halted and scrubbed his eyes. He needed his Ojisan. Despite all his daydreams, he wanted to be a weaver, wanted to sit beside his grandfather and learn the secrets of silk and loom. "I just want my family," Cato choked out. "Please, I just want to go home with my whole family." Something tugged at his jinbei. He whirled. The baby dragon stood behind him, earnestly looking up. He stepped back, stepped forward again, a question in his face. Relief surged through Cato. He dropped to his knees and wrapped both arms around the dragon. "I don't know what to do," he sobbed. "I'm not brave or strong like I thought. Ojisan is in danger and there's no one who can help, and I'm all alone and I don't know what to do." The dragon had tensed when Cato hugged him, but now he stepped forward, laid his neck about his shoulders, and drew him close. The boy clutched him tighter and poured out the magician's deadly threat. "The boy clings to me, his words running together in a flood, but the meaning is clear. He needs my help. An hour ago, I was lost and alone. 5 minutes ago, I was yet again, but now I am not. The boy cannot hear me, and while my mother's bond taught me much, it did not teach me how the bond is forged, the vows spoken or the ritual performed that allows dragon and man to know each other's hearts. But I do not need that here. I know my heart, and I know this boy's need." I pull back my neck, bring my face close to his, and lick away his tears. "That tickles," he sniffs. "Does this mean, do you know what to do?" I nod and walk up the slope, back toward the waiting magician. Cato hurries to catch up. "Can you show me the plan? I can help." I look up at him with one eye. There is no plan, just a simple choice. My mother and her samurai made it first, giving up their last moments together to protect me. They showed me what friendship between man and dragon should be. They made my choice easy. I shake my head. No, I cannot explain. But when you and your Ojisan make it back to Ryuki Karai, tell the others that I, too, lived up to the oath of the dragon friends. I continue up the slope. After a few paces, a hand rests on my shoulder. Yes, the boy understands, even if he doesn't know. Step matching step, we go to face the magician. Cato stood with the dragon and looked down at the lonely cart. Ojisan sat beside a wheel, his legs stretched out and wrapped in his cloak. The magician paced before him, the red of his robe a bright stain in the gulch. Cato rubbed the dragon's shoulder. The scale's edges were soft, smooth, and waxy. "I keep forgetting how young he is, yet he doesn't act like a child." Cato chewed his lip. What was the dragon planning? The creature stood tensely beside him, the slight flicker of his nostrils the only sign that he breathed. Cato wished he could soothe him, but his own heart pounded fearfully in his chest. A shiver ran through the dragon from his tiny horn nubs to his tail. Then he started down the slope. The magician looked up, and a dark smile parted his lips. "You've brought back my young friend. Come, I am eager to be better acquainted." The dragonette shuddered again, but continued down the slope. Cato's heart beat faster. This was it. A few steps more, and the dragonette would enact his plan. Should Cato try to help? They halted in front of the magician. The baby dragon looked up at the leering magician, then slowly lay down at the man's feet, tucking his wings tight around his body. The magician smiled. "Welcome, friend." Cato caught his breath. Wasn't he going to attack? The magician squatted and lifted the dragon's chin. The dragonette squeezed his eyes shut, but didn't resist. You should be excited. You are about to witness a new era between man and beast. Cato shuddered. Do something. Do something. The magician rose. You've fulfilled your end of the bargain, boy. As soon as I've created a bond with this one, you and your grandfather may go. Ojisan hobbled to his feet. Why not now? Because we wouldn't want the dragon running off again before I'm finished. The magician smiled, and the baby dragon flinched. Go care for your Ojisan, boy. In a daze, Cato supported Ojisan and helped him onto the cart. Was this really it? Ojisan squeezed his arm. Stoke up the mule. Get us ready to leave. Cato nodded. He started to clamber off the cart, then paused. Ojisan, I thought the dragon would fight or run or something. But he just came back, and I didn't even ask. I don't understand. What's he doing? Ojisan looked to where the dragon crouched on his belly, tail wrapped about his feet. The magician paced around him, muttering a low chant and drawing the characters in the dust. It's the way of the dragon, friend. Protect the weak, no matter the cost, Ojisan whispered. Cato gasped. But he can't. He needs to get home. Shh. Ojisan squeezed his shoulder. He is honoring his family and name. We must honor his choice. Go now. Cato stumbled off the cart and toward the mule. He dumped the long-forgotten gourd into its tank, then moved to its belly to check the fire. The magician's chant rose, and purple energy streamed up from the circle of characters. Cato didn't want to watch, but the ritual drew his gaze. The dragon crouched, eyes tight shut, his nostrils quivering. The way of the dragon, friend. As if he sensed Cato, the dragon opened his eyes and locked gazes with the boy. Even without words, Cato could see the terror, the pain in the young dragon's eyes, but also resolve, pride, even fear-laden joy. You're a true dragon, friend, Cato whispered. The dragon bobbed his head, a salute from one friend to another, then shut his eyes and laid his head on his paws. Cato's fingers curled around the furnace's handle. No, no, he wouldn't let the dragon lose his freedom without a fight. The magician completed his circle and faced the baby dragon, his eyes lit by the glowing kanji. And now, little one, you are mine. No! Cato yelled. He yanked out the fire grate and flung the crimson coals into the magician's face. The man shrieked. The purple script flared high. The stench of burning flesh filled the air. I was losing myself, my will being drawn in by the red man, sucked up like water on desert ground. The magic pulled me, and it hurt, and I knew this bond being forced upon me would never be a bond of friend to friend, like my mother shared with her samurai, but rather of master to slave. The magic wrapped around me, ready to seal the deed. Then, you are mine. No! The word slices through the chains, even as something snaps into place inside me. A second consciousness, a second voice, appears beside my own. My eyes fly open. The magician staggers back, clawing at his face. He reaches for the weapon at his side. I leap. He's turned away, facing Cato and the cart, his right shoulder toward me as he raises the gun. I crash into him, teeth closing on his wrist, my weight forcing his arm up and away from the boy, from my friend. The magician cries out and staggers. Something explodes between my teeth, rattling my skull and upending earth and sky. I blink and shake my head, trying to clear the ringing in my ears. I'm lying on something warm and crimson. Smoke and sulfur stain the air, mingling with the fading tang of magic. Footsteps pound up behind me. Little dragon! Cato skids to a halt at my shoulder and gapes down. Is he? I push myself up off the limp crimson form. Its head is thrown back. eyes glassy. A black bolt protrudes from beneath its chin. He is indeed dead, Kei-chan. The boy shudders and pulls the robe across the dead face. I suppose we should bring him back to Ryuki Karai, though I'm not sure how to put him on the cart, what with Oji-san's leg. I shake my head. It will not hurt to leave him for a few hours. We can send back riders to fetch the body. True. Kato pauses, then turns wide eyes on me. Did you just talk in my head? I stare at the boy, again aware of the warm second presence humming within my mind. I tentatively reach out. Yes? I can feel him hear me even before he leaps and claps his hands. We can talk. I'm talking to a dragon. What happened? How did we... Kei-chan! Kei-chan! Oji-san shouts from the cart. Are you hurt? Is the red crow dead? Oji-san, the dragon talked to me. Oji-san pushes his hat back and stares at me. Slowly, he grips the pile of brocade and wobbles to his feet. Oji-san, be careful! Your leg! Kato dashes forward and seizes his arm. The old weaver grips his shoulder, but his eyes remain on me. So, you've chosen my Kei-chan? I slowly nod. I'm still not sure what happened, if I chose him or if, somehow, we chose each other. But I understand what the bond means, and I do not regret it. He has the heart of a warrior. Kato flushes. He says I have a warrior's heart, Oji-san, and... He falters, but I encourage him. He is honored to have me as his friend. Oji-san bows deeply. You honor our family greatly. I am a poor, foolish grandfather, but I do not think you could find a better friend. Nor do I. Come, Oji-san settles on the seat. If my dragon friend grandson will rebuild the fire he threw in that coyote's face, we should reach Ryuki Karai shortly after dark. Kato nods and hurries to obey. I crawl up the heap of brocade and find a place at the top. When Kato returns, I drop my neck so my head is level with his. He reaches up and strokes me. Thank you for saving Oji-san. Thank you for saving me. Is that what it means, to be a dragon friend? I think back to my mother, the love she had for her samurai, and his care for her. I believe so. Oh. He wriggles on the seat. Oji-san adjusts some dials and steam huffs from the mule. Do you regret this? We will be bonded for life. That's a long time to put the needs of another ahead of your own. Kato shakes his head and rests his hand on my neck. Not when they would do the same for me. Not when they're my friend. Oji-san releases the brake, and with a shudder that sets the fabric swaying, we start down the slope toward Ryuki Karai, city of the Dragon Friends.
I hope you enjoyed listening to The Weaver and the Dragon by Lauren Hildebrand, narrated by Paeter Frandsen of Christian Geek Central. If you want to read more by Lauren, go to lauren-hildebrand.mailchimpsites.com to find more of her work. Her debut novel, The Weeping Knight, is about a knight hunting for his kidnapped squire, and it's available on her site or on Amazon. The Weaver and the Dragon is part of an anthology I featured before called The Sun Still Rises. It's a fantastic anthology put together in memory of Lonnie Forbes, a well-loved fantasy author in the Realmmakers community who lost her battle with cancer. All proceeds from the anthology go to her family. If you enjoyed listening to Paeter narrate the story, you might also enjoy listening to his audio dramas at spiritblade.com or his podcast, Christian Geek Central, where he discusses movies, video games, and all things enjoyed by self-proclaimed geeks from a Christian worldview. If you haven't already subscribed to Finding Fantasy Reads on the podcast app of your choice, you should. When Apple sees that people are subscribed, they boost the show, which helps other people find it. I don't know. It's all those marketing algorithms that I don't care to research, even though I probably should because they're important. But the more people who find the podcast, the longer I can keep putting more episodes out. So subscribe to the podcast and help spread the word. As always, I will have links for all the sites I mentioned, including how to subscribe, in the show notes. Thank you all for listening, and happy reading.